It's my privilege to introduce the keynote speaker, Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan, who many of us know him as an industry stalwart with the association of the likes of Unilever and Tata Steel. And many, many more of us know him today as an eminent author. His latest book, Doodles on Leadership, excellent insight on leadership in the corporate world. We welcome you, sir. Let's give him a big round of applause. Followed by the keynote session, we are going to witness a very interesting conversation between Mr. Ashank Desai, Vice Chairman SIGN, and Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Now, may I request Mr. Gopalakrishnan to deliver his keynote address. We welcome you, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me here to this wonderful function. And may I begin also by adding my own personal congratulations to SIGN and IIT Bombay and all the supporting ecosystem of the government, academia, and so on. This is very energizing. I think you should have a function like this every Saturday and call 1,500 people because we need action in the country, not just speeches. And maybe SIGN can play a role in this. Entrepreneurship is probably, as been pointed out by Professor Santosh, a very key thing all over the world. It's not just in India. And I think those days when big steel plants and automotive factories will provide the jobs are fast receding. They themselves are in threat with new technology developments. I got very interested in the subject of innovation and entrepreneurship, which I consider as two sides of the same coin. When Ratan Tata asked me back in 2004 to see how we can change the culture of innovation in Tatas. Now, if somebody said, get us new processes, that's somewhat easier. Because as a former student of physics and engineering, I can sit down, draw some diagrams, make processes. But to change culture is a far more complex exercise. And therefore, for the next 10 or 11 years before I retired, I led what is called the TGIF, which doesn't stand for Thank God It's Friday, but Tata Group Innovation Forum. And I have to say, in all honesty, we did not dramatically transform the culture of Tata Group because I think that's unreasonable to expect. In 10 years, you'll just change everything. You can't change the culture of this country in 10 years. But I think we put in certain building blocks and develop certain perspectives. And it caused me to think a lot. I traveled to many international companies like GE, like Honeywell, and I went to many universities like the London Business School, London School of Economics, Stanford, to understand what is the current and contemporary thinking on innovation and entrepreneurship. And I probably scratched 1% of the available knowledge. But it gave me certain perspectives. And what I want to do in the 10 minutes or 15 minutes that I have is to just share some of these perspectives. You will forgive me for making it bullet points because the real chat is going to come through the fire, which is Ashank Desai. A fireside chat, I told him, I will chat, you provide the fire. The major, and remember, a major insight is what has happened to the person concerned. Somebody may say this is very normal, it's well known. So, for me, the major insight was that the whole field of innovation and entrepreneurship, and whatever literature and conversations I could have, were all modeled on the principles of physics. They were inorganic processes. You were trying to create mechanical equivalents which could be replicated with reliability. That's the principle of physics and engineering. So you have stage gates, you have decision gates, you have decision rules, who should sit there, what should be done, how a decision should be taken. And there's software to support it. And when I reflected on the actual cultural processes going on in my companies, I realized it's like biology and nothing like physics or engineering. The most innovative thing that human beings have ever achieved is human reproduction. Because it's been going on for a long time, otherwise none of us would be here. And the act of a mother raising a child is an act of huge innovation. And I liken the process of innovation to the biological process. And I found it far more relevant. I have great respect for biology and physics. 40 years ago, you talk to an academic, he would have said biology is some flunky subject, engineering and physics are the real subjects. It's not so anymore. As you could see, the BIRAC and the biotechnology activity is 50%, you said, of the activity here. So I likened the innovation process. You could take any innovation project, from ISRO's putting a project of a rocket on the Mars or the Moon, to Hindustan Unilever making Fair and Lovely, or the development of nano project. It may succeed or fail, but the lessons to be learned. To the stages which a mother goes through when raising her child. First comes a fertilization, which in this case happens in the brain and not in the womb. And in the brain, there are neural processes, which I have traced. By the way, I wrote a book on this called A Biography of Innovations, and that's my source. And I found many similarities between what's happening in the reproductive system and the brain, which I've, in a layman's way, articulated after having verified it with neurological specialists. The fact that an idea is in your head doesn't mean it can be entrepreneurial. Because ideas are there going on all the time. But 9 months later, to use the metaphor, it's sometimes 90 years, sometimes never, you're able to articulate it by sketching it, by talking about it. And when you articulate it, another person can at least have a chance to understand it. So if you say, what is the history of heavier than air flying objects in the world? People will say Wilbur and Orville Wright. But Valmiki thought of it. For those of us who have read the Ramayana, and I would assume that's many of us, he described the Pushpaka Vimana, which means the thought had been in his head. He was able to articulate it in the form of poetry, and the detail in which Valmiki describes the Pushpaka Vimana shows the articulation was in great, it's an engineering drawing. Except that he couldn't take it to the next step, idea generation, articulation, and the third stage is maternity, delivery of the baby. He could not make a prototype. So an idea that came 3,000 years ago got articulated again by Leonardo da Vinci. When he drew, he saw birds flying and he said, how can I, these are heavier than air. And all of us know that he drew sketches of birds, he ripped apart their wings, tried to create the same structures, but couldn't find anybody to volunteer to jump off the Leaning Tower of Pisa to validate the exercise. And then it went down till 1902, when Wilbur and Orville Wright could actually create the articulation into a prototype which flew for 12 seconds or 12 minutes. And of course, aviation has transformed. In the same way, there is fertilization, maternity, delivery, there is which is articulation, which goes into then infancy, childhood, adolescence, market supremacy, and finally into old age. And one of the things that much innovation and entrepreneurial literature does not do, and I say this with humility because I have not studied all the literature that is available, is to say there are different nurturing solutions at each stage of rearing a child. They say you must have an open atmosphere, people must express their opinion, you must have freedom. That gives the impression everybody should be in a garage somewhere hoping that a couple of $1 billion will fall his way. To a young mind, that seems very attractive, but that's not true. For example, serendipity, mindset, associative thinking are very good at the early stages. But at some stage, in adolescence, equivalent, you must have discipline, rigor, and processes. And the moment you have discipline, rigor, and processes, if people think this is no more entrepreneurial, that's a mistake. Ashank will tell you himself, the idea of getting Mastech would have gone through a process, but if they weren't able to have repeatable software development processes, there would not be any TCS or Mastech. And so taking all these ideas, I wrote a book, which has then given me the basis on which to develop other ideas. But the central idea that I had was there is a mindset that must be influenced in an entrepreneur. And maybe you all are doing it, but I have not found many people trying to change the mindset from idea generation. Many young people think, I've got an idea, so I'm an entrepreneur. That's not what an entrepreneur is all about. And the acid test for entrepreneurship is an IPO. If you're not IPO worthy, it's like saying, I'm an engineer, but I'm not a BTech or an MTech. Now, you may still be an engineer without being a BTech or an MTech. There are geniuses like that. And I can see the journey that TCS went through. I think the largest startup that India has of an idea which was in the brain in 1968 was TCS. Many others, very admirable companies like Infosys and so on followed. It's a product of its time. It took from 1968 till the end of the century, the millennium, to develop a model, to make your mistakes, go through infancy, childhood, adolescence. And when I was a participant in the discussions whether we should have an IPO, it was a tortuous process. You had a so-called large company, which is not quite ready. It's like a guy who stayed a bachelor and stayed with his mother till the age of 45, and then you say, now go dating a girl to get married. And it's very complicated. It's better to do it when you're 25. So the mindset of the startup, and we have created, at least in our pink paper literature, the impression that there is two different worlds. These planets don't intersect in their orbit or in their mass. Startup world and old fuddy-duddies like Tatas and Levers. And in a conversation a year and a half ago, my brother and I have two very different backgrounds. I mean, both of us have studied in IIT, IIM, and so on. He started his careers in large companies like Nestle, DCM. And somewhere at the age of 35 said, I must be an entrepreneur. And he went and started up two companies. This is back in 75, 80, when it was far tougher. There was no Sign or anybody else available. Failed both times, but came out unscathed and is now a big angel investor in Chennai. And I went into big companies and I stayed with big companies. I had entrepreneurial experience because in a large company also, he's like the angel investor, he's like the private equity company, they nurture. And I was chairman of two such companies in Tata's. And we were having our usual sibling jousting when I said, all you startups are all frauds, you produce nothing. I mean, I was just being provocative for a discussion. And he said, you old fuddy-duddies are on the mortality index far advanced, and there won't be, these companies won't exist. So we were not having a conversation. Then we sat down and chatted a little more seriously. Some C2H5OH helped in the process. And found that we had some annular spaces that were common. And what we ended up doing is to write a book called What Startups Can Learn from Grown-Ups. And we named it Corporate Ayurveda. We said that if a human body can aspire for long life, and there are principles of how to live long, and those are all very well articulated, who's writing such a book for corporates? Startups don't think of long life. You're not supposed to think of it. You're supposed to think of it when it's like a human being who puts on weight, drinks, smokes. At the age of 60, he now starts thinking of long life. It doesn't work. And so we wrote a book where he said, how can a startup create a company which has a lasting value? Many people said, you're wasting your time. We said, the publisher is there, authors are there, we've written a book, it's in the printing press, in editing now, it'll come out in June. And then I stumbled upon a person, one of our Indian compatriots, I think his name is Taneja, Vineet Taneja, if my memory serves me right. I think I have a copy of it. He wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review, building a startup that will last. Okay? Hemant Taneja. And then he's written a book also called Unscale, which I found fascinating because he tries to describe what is it that a startup can do to learn from a grown-up. They are not two different islands which are unconnected. They are one ecosystem. Tata was also a startup, but that was in 1870. TCS was a startup in 1970. Today, TCS is the biggest company within Tata Group, the most valuable company. When I joined Tata's, and I used to get the monthly statement, you had to look for TCS. It was at the end of the tail, and you wondered where the tail was. There was Tata Steel, Tata Motors, everything else up front. And that is the way renewal happens. The renewal of an ecosystem, I'm talking of a commercial business ecosystem, enterprise ecosystem, happens when the big boys groom the small boys, then they go, like a father passes on to his son, and his son passes on to the grandson. And that is the kind of thing that science seems to be very coherently doing. It's only 15 years. 15 years looks like a long time. But Poini, I hope you'll have a 30-year ceremony. And when you have a 30-year ceremony, you will remember my humble suggestion. If one signed startup can have an IPO, that will make you the Stanford of India. It's not a target. I am nobody to set you a target. I will give that task to Ashank and Mr. Gharpure, Professor Gharpure, and so on. But startup ecosystem doesn't understand the value of being IPO worthy. You know, it is huge. No startup in India, Flipkart, $16 billion, $20 billion is IPO worthy. And they won't be IPO worthy for a long time. That doesn't make them bad startups, but they don't make them exemplars. The only one we have is TCS and Biocon. And I've written a book on TCS and Biocon on this aspect, which has just come into the market, because I believe India needs startups that can become companies, companies that can become institutions. And for that journey, I wish you well. Poini willing, we'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The anecdotes are forever insightful, and it continues to be. Thank you. May I invite Mr. Ashank Desai, Vice Chairman Scion, to take the stage to have a conversation with Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Welcome you, sir.
Hello. So thanks, Gopal, to be here. When Poini said he's inviting you, I said, how did you find his time? Because when I called him yesterday to check, he says he's in immigration, so I was greatly scared you are going away from sign or, but fortunately he was coming from somewhere. So he has found some time slot for us. For that, thanks. He, of course, has talked about many things, and he's a great leader that I know him for many years now. We have been lucky to be with him on many boards, and I know his ability not only as a executive, of course, in Levers and Tata Sons and so on, but as a board member, the kind of contribution he brings. And now, of course, a great author. I mean, the communication and articulation that he has and analogies are really, I just think, how does he think about it? Honestly, I think like that. Only complaint, of course, on lighter side I have is that he went to wrong IIT. I keep on telling him. He is not convinced, of course. No, on the lighter side. He says IIT Bombay is very small. Hamari history bahut badi hai. Yes, he was trying to convince me. But no, on a serious side, thanks for this idea of physics versus biology. I think I didn't think along those lines. Let me be honest. So you are saying that innovation or entrepreneurship is about something which is beyond just cause and effect in a conventional physical sense, but something more which is biological, or would you like to elaborate in the sense of difference between physics and biology? You did talk about, but I just want you to.
In a physics process, or even in chemistry for that matter, an experiment is repeatable, and you do the same thing, you'll get the same outcome. The biology is not like that. Biology works with its own bacterial paths. And so, other factors, which are biological in origin, and I learned this when I went to be the managing director of a tea company. And until then, having come from a soap, shampoo, detergent, surfactant background, I did not have much knowledge or esteem for fermentation and biological processes. But when I went to the tea business, I learned that when you put a little leaf of black tea at one end of the firing chamber, by the time it comes out, you can't predict which path it's going to take. How the riboflavins will develop, how the phenolics will develop. And so you have to learn about fermentation. So that got me a bit interested. And I used, now that's a complicated metaphor to use if you're going to talk to average people. My definition of average is, if I could explain it to my wife, it works. And because I'm an average husband as well. And then I thought of this mother and child. Because that, my wife understands. You cannot raise my child, I cannot raise my son, even if he's the same age as your son, in the same way. I cannot raise my second son the same way as I raised my first son. So psychology, in the case of raising your family, that is, psychology, sociology, circumstance, context all come in. And that's the principle that biology teaches you. So the fact that an innovation worked this way, that Steve Jobs happened to come out of a garage, and so did David Packard and Hewlett and so on, you cannot then assume that if I'm in a garage, I'll make it. You know, I remember when I had my thread ceremony many, many years ago, my father and my uncle told me, just follow whatever the priest does. And I was 8 or 9 years old. I said, that's not difficult. Now, as you know, priests tend to have a rather more rotund middle compared to 9-year-old children. And in the heat of Delhi, a bead of sweat, and I was very observant as a child, came all the way down, and you're bare-chested, went on his rotund thing and started slipping down. He must have felt a bit tickled. So at one stage, he started scratching. And I had nothing to scratch. But I thought that's part of the ceremony, so I also started scratching. That's not the way management can be practiced or entrepreneurship. Therefore, biology.
Okay, great analogy. So there are many entrepreneurs around here. I'm sure they are closely listening to you. And instead of being physics, as all IITians we do, be more practicing biology. But I must tell you, they are taking great interest in biology. As you know, half of them are healthcare and related kind of innovations. Moving forward, though, you made a very important point, and which is missed out by all the entrepreneurs, as you rightly said, to moving from serendipity to process. And failure occurs at that point of time. I keep on saying, somehow I have found a law of my own, which seemed to have been ratified by some Harvard or some professor after research. It takes 6 or 7 years really to a company to reach a level where they can confidently say that now I am on the way. It happened to me in Mastech, it happened to me in even in NASCOM, I say, and many others that I'm involved somehow. So I think that's where this serendipity versus process issue comes up. Are you building something which is replicable, which is growing, and so on and so forth? So I am again taking back you to that biology. Where would you put that process and biology again? Just to bring back the analogy.
No, thank you. You're asking very insightful questions. And since I've written a book, I'm able to answer it also. One of the things I inquired is about this. Because people say, oh, Tatas are bureaucratic. Of course they are bureaucratic. You can't churn out profits and dividends year after year. IIT Bombay is bureaucratic in some respects. In other respects, it must be flexible. So it's the ability to combine the two that matters. So I looked around at Nobel Prize winners. Or I didn't go that far. I actually looked at people who were nominated to the National Academy of Sciences in the United States. And one of the sources for that is the people who get high quality scholarships. And a study was published about all the people who had got I think it's called the Westinghouse Scholarship. And then they tracked their careers as scientists and engineers in their career. And they found that not more than 3 or 4 or 5, I've forgotten the exact number, had been admitted to the National Academy of Sciences. Which suggests that all those brilliant people you found early did not make it all the way. And the question arose, why is there such a high mortality? These are all exceptionally bright people from exceptionally bright institutes. If I took 10,000 IIT graduates, and at the time they were 25, and found that only 100 got through to what you might consider a pinnacle of achievement. But the two things that come to my mind, which I can remember now, one is the mere awareness that I'm considered very bright has dimmed my brightness. This is a bit like if you have a son or a daughter and you keep saying, beta, God has made all the brains in the world in your head, you're sure to screw up that child's life. Okay? So, too early an accolade kills the very source of what is. So that is one. The second thing that they found is people who have been declared to be brilliant at a very early age develop a fixed mindset. And if you read the very phenomenal academic work done by Carol Dweck, who used to be a professor at Stanford, I'm not sure where she is now, professors keep moving around, but she's written a very good book called Mindset. She said there are two kinds of mindsets, growth mindset and fixed mindset. People are not born or reared to be one or the other. You keep moving from one to the other. There comes a stage in the life of a startup when from the growth mindset is characterized by experimentation, trying new things, not being scared to fail. You must move to a fixed mindset when you must have replicable processes, reliable things. And then you must be able to go back and forth. And I think that is one aspect I can remember. I don't know if we teach it to our entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs who think that every morning I can get up. Even Mr. Tata told me, he said, I would like people to come into Tata Steel in the morning and say, hey, I thought of this last night, why don't I do it? I think it is a manner of speaking. If you run a blast furnace that way, you won't have much of a factory left.
Now, let me move to the stage beyond process to building an institution. Now, I am now moving from entrepreneurs to Sign actually. You know, in Sign, we are all working hard to build an institution. Now, Sign may be a different type of institution if I call it not a business institution, but it's an institution of a different kind, which has its own challenges and own vision and so on. So, what advice would you give Sign from where it is coming? It has stakeholders, we talked about all of them. What kind of leadership do you expect? You have written a lot on leadership, so I must ask you the questions there. What are the kind of qualities? What are the kind of things that we should be doing at Sign to make it an institution of the kind
Ashank,
that you talk about?
You must be an antaryami of some kind. I don't know how you're reading my mind. I was saying, I hope he asked me this question. You know, I go as a, what is it called? Executive in residence to SP Jain Institute of Management. And people thought my retirement package is inadequate to provide me housing, so I've gone on executive in residence. But I assured them it was not the case. And this is exactly the question. About 2 years ago, I'm not used to attending faculty meetings. And the meetings that I am used to from the corporate side are highly disciplined. There's an agenda, you discuss the agenda, you agree actions, you close, take, talk. Faculty meetings are a class by themselves. That's what I found. In the case of SP Jain, I don't know about other faculty. To be safe, I may have rotten eggs thrown at me. I merely, over a cup of stimulating coffee, asked the question, is there a difference between a good company and a great institution? Which is the question you're asking. You want to apply it to Sign, but I will give you the generic results. I don't know if it is applicable to Sign. And there was a huge blabber. And for the next 6 months, it was all over the bloody place.
I see.
But in a good way. In a good way, it is positive. You must get ideas. And then some of the faculty undertook to, each one had a different background, organizational behavior, psychology, economics. They went through their literature. And I was given a pota of papers on the subject. Now I had to because I am a great believer. Faculty come with the mindset of theory before experience. I have come into the institute of the experience before theory. So there's a natural clash. I took this stuff and I wrote a master paper based on the research of other people, to be honest, with all the references, as best as I could do it, on the difference between an institution and a good company. You could substitute the word company by institute or whatever you want. And then we developed, on a theoretical basis, a framework of what are the mindsets, behaviors, and attitudes. Mindset, behaviors, and actions, not attitude. MBA. And we said, let's reinvent the MBA program from teaching people to keep the car moving. Most of our management programs, our maintenance engineers are produced, to being a different mindset, behavior, and action. And we identified 8 Brahma Mantras. I'm calling it Brahma Mantra because I participated in this exercise.
Please tell us.
Huh?
Please tell us those Brahma.
And we then selected a number of companies which would meet certain criteria. I'm not going to go into the detail now. And I approached the CEOs, because I know all the CEOs of those companies, and 6 of them agreed to participate. I'm giving you the background before I tell you the Brahma Mantra. You know, Brahma Mantra is not given easily. You have to do some tapasya for it.
I thought we have done enough.
So one is Larsen & Toubro, where Anil Nayak took a company which was 50,000 crores, market cap to 250,000 crores. One is TCS, where Fakir Chand Kohli and Ramadurai took it from nothing to a $2 billion IPO in 2004, and now it's 100 billion. One is Biocon. It's a woman entrepreneur who took technology which was not even considered technology back in the 70s. Brewing was a man's world, and a woman is coming there, and she's created, based on solid state fermentation and that Koji fermentation, a whole new company, which is worth 6 billion. Then we took Marico, where Harsh Mariwala took a commodity player and produced a consumer company out of it. We've got Deepak Parekh, who's created a financial conglomerate out of a mortgage model which is distinctly unique, and Uday Kotak. So I wrote to one or two others, but they did not participate, so I won't go into that. This is not a prize-giving ceremony. And I personally sat in on the interviews with all these 6 people. But of course, I didn't sit in all the interviews. I have an academic partner, and I pride myself, I hope not wrongly, this is the first time an academic and a practitioner are pairing together to produce a book. So there will be tendencies on both sides which could be converged. The first 3 books are out. Biocon, TCS, and Larsen & Toubro. The others will come out in. So in this Brahma Mantra, now the Brahma Mantra, there were 8 things that we identified, of which 3 were common. Poini, you're listening? Because he's a vice chairman. He's going to put this on your head. And don't blame me for it.
That's why I'm asking you.
There were 3 things that were common, and 5 were like a golfer, you know. You don't use the same club, but 3 things you needed. And I'll just focus on those 3 so that my answer doesn't become too long. The first is people and skills. I've been a CEO of a company, and I know how I spent my time. But when I listen to these people, they use different words for it. Between 25 to 45% of their time, mental time, not clock time, was spent on people, skills, which is absolutely stunning. Of course, in the books you have described what they actually did. I'm giving you the headline. The second Brahma Mantra was critical thinking. Critical thinking is a term we coined, a bit based on the academic literature, to say that if you're faced with a situation where you have to choose between option A, B, and C, so why not D and E? And I've had this experience with Ratan Tata for sure. You go with an urgency in your voice to say, hey boss, this is the problem and we can do A, B, or C. And he would say, is that so? Okay. Just repeat the problem again. He's almost giving you the impression he has not understood. Actually, he wants to understand it in more detail. He's thinking. And then he said, but why didn't you think of that? D and E. The ability to generate alternatives by asking the question, are you being an engineer who's reductionist in his approach, and you go into the object and try to find out what is in it, or are you being an architect who's saying, what is this object a part of? If I presented the model of the earth to a geologist, he would dig, and he will tell you what minerals and what water he could find. If you gave it to an astronomer, he wouldn't even know that. But he said, this is part of a galaxy. That's critical thinking. And the third Brahma Mantra, and I will stop there because I don't want to run through all the 8 right now. These are the most important, is a distinctive ability to address short and long term simultaneously. In the corporate world, I don't know about academics, the corporate world, you have a lot of people who say, oh, I'm so busy, I have to take telephone calls, conference calls, I don't have time to think of the long term. A mother who's raising a child never gives up her dreams for her child's piano class and French class and whatever, while she's cleaning up the nappies and spending a tough day. So I hope if you want more details, of course, you must buy my book, but...
I hope. So 3 of them are out, you said?
3 books are coming.
So each company will have a book, you mean? Okay, so you...
In each book, we have described the research methodology in which this table appears. And it tells you, I'm calling it Brahma Mantra loosely, mindset, behavior, action. And the summary is illustrated through the episodes in the book.
I see, great. I'm really looking forward to reading like your all other books. So, so you talked about, how much time do you have, by the way? I thought we have almost done. So, but I'm still going to ask you, last one that you talked about, which is really very important and least known, is shuttling between long-term and short-term thinking. Because management is about this whole paradox, or not paradox, but you know, you have to be between long-term and short-term, you have to be between democratic and decisive, and so on and so forth. We can draw this whole paradoxes that you should live in. So don't you think if you keep on doing like that, you will become schizophrenic or something like that?
Well, if
Where
all
you
of
have
us are willing to admit
just
that
for the
out,
lighter side before we finish.
I'm not willing
How
to
do we practice this double thinking or double modes of thinking? How do you go about doing it in the sense?
Well, I can only speak from the experience that I've had, which will match up with the experience anybody else has had here. That there are two types of time. One is clock time, Titan clock time, which gives you so many seconds and so many minutes and so many hours. And we tend to think in our rational mind of clock time. मेरे पास समय नहीं है, सुबह से ये होता है, रात को ये होता है. But inside your cranium, there is an infinite mental time. There are 4 kinds of time. I'm not going to go into all of them. Clock time, mental time, psychological time, and spiritual time. Psychological time is if I'm meeting my girlfriend, the evening finishes so soon. If I'm meeting my head of the department, it seems to drag on and on. So that's psychological time. But I'll talk about mental time. Mental time is hugely elastic. There are huge gaps of your brain. Our brain is utilized to the extent of, is worse than a steam engine. And that's how you learn to do things together. I hope I've given a simple enough answer.
No, I would have liked this to be 1 more hour, but I don't think we have time today. But I would only request you first to get associated or advise us in sign as we move ahead in this journey.
As I told you earlier, I'm the cause.
Yeah, he said he's a cos. I said not cos, but cosine. So you go with sine, you become cosine. But, and also our entrepreneurs, they'll be very happy to hear your wise words, and we should invite you maybe more often to talk to our sign entrepreneurs. But it was great to be, Gopal, to be with you. It always has been my privilege to be with you, as I said earlier, and the discussion that you have. So thank again on behalf of Sign for coming here, and wish we remain connected in Sign more often.
Thank you, and thank you for this honor and privilege of inviting